So we're back for a third video. I wasn't expecting to make a second video on this bike, let alone a third, but here we are. So in the last video, we improved the drivetrain. We got that to where it works really well. The only other gripe I had with this bike was ride quality. And a lot of you guys recommended things like carbon forks and carbon posts and larger tires. That was the biggest one. And that's the perfect recommendation. That's exactly the way to go. It's the best way to improve ride on a bike. Unfortunately, these older bikes, they were built around thinner tires. So this bike was designed for 25mm tires. Fitting tires wider than that is a gamble. On this frame, 28s, they just don't fit. So to illustrate the point, I've borrowed the 28 off my wife's bike. I'm gonna fit it here. There is so little clearance that it hits or nearly hits this front derailleur bracket. I've got you guys zoomed in so you can get a better look at the clearance at the front derailleur clamp. I've got Continental Ultra Sport 28s fitted. At 100 PSI, these measure out at 27mm, so not the full 28 on these rims. As I roll this tire around, note how little clearance there is. Because the tire's not perfectly round, at some points it actually does hit that clamp. So while it does rotate, and I could technically ride it like this, the first time I went through sand or gravel and the tires picked it up, it would come around and it would wedge right in here. So this clearance is so small that 28 tires are just not doable on this frame. The widest I can go is 25. I did spend some money, about 120 bucks, I think. It's off the top of my head, I could be wrong. If I am, I'll put it on the screen. I bought a carbon seat post and a new carbon fork. Let's take a look at the couple of items I bought for today's video. So the first is this carbon fiber seat post. I got this one on Amazon. It was right around 40 bucks. I've used this particular post on several bikes and I've never had any trouble with it. So this one I think will work out. And the second is a new carbon fork. So this is a Bucklos brand fork. It's a Chinese made fork. I've actually used their forks on other builds and I've also never had a problem with these. The quality is really good for how much you spend. So we need to cut this down. We're gonna fit it to the bike. If it fits and it works out, then we're gonna give it a coat of paint to match the frame. So we've got these two items here. We're gonna fit them. We're gonna see if these new carbon fiber parts will do anything for comfort, and we'll see how much weight they save us. Before we pull the bike apart, let's weigh these new components, see what they weigh. And then after I get the bike apart, we'll weigh the old ones. We'll see what those weigh. So starting with the carbon seat post, this one weighs in at 174 grams. I hope you guys can see that. And then the fork, I'm gonna kind of have to balance this on here. So it's not touching anything, it's just sitting on the scale. So the new fork, 390 grams. So that's 174 for the seat post and 390 for the fork. Let's go over to the bike, let's take it apart and we'll weigh the old components. All right, well let's get this fork off. I'm gonna take the wheel off because that probably should have been done first. Ah, almost lost it. And then I'm gonna leave the brake attached to the handlebars. I'm gonna leave the stem sort of hanging off the cables. Be careful that it doesn't damage the paint. And then I'm gonna pull the fork out and even leave the upper headset in place. So here's our fork. This one is aluminum, it's not a carbon fork. And it's surprisingly heavy for what it is. So let's take it over and we'll weigh it. I'm curious to see how much it weighs. So I don't remember what the carbon fork weighs, so I'm going to reweigh it. See if I can get this to balance. So that's 389 grams. And then the aluminum fork, and so there's just the fork, no bearings. Whoa, 706 grams. So what is that, about 350 grams heavier? And this fork is aluminum. There's no carbon here. At least it doesn't have a steel steerer. So to fit this fork, I need to cut the steerer tube to length. I like the length of the steerer on the original fork, so I'm going to run this one the same length. I've transferred that length and I've put a Sharpie mark here. I'm going to cut this with a tile saw, with a wet saw. They do a really good job, leave a nice clean surface or a nice clean cut. I want to make sure that that's square though. So the way I do that is I take a stem, I put it on, and I slide it down to my mark. And now I'm going to wrap this with masking tape, and that masking tape will act as a guide. Putting the stem on here helps to ensure that I install this, that I get my masking tape line square. I need to clamp it though so it doesn't move. All right, so stem is on to act as a guide. I'm going to wrap this with masking tape so I get a nice square edge here that I can follow with the tile saw. This tape is not here to prevent fraying or any other damage to the steer, because like I mentioned, that tile saw will not damage the steer. It leaves a really nice clean cut. It's only here to act as a guide. This is just a basic cheap tile saw or wet saw. I've had this one for probably 20 years. I got it at Harbor Freight. It's been a good tool. I leave it outside so it's in kind of rough shape, but it still works really well. This piece of aluminum here, this is aluminum angle plate. I've got it clamped to the table with a C-clamp. This is square to the blade. The way I'm going to cut this is I've got the fork, there's that tape I put on. I am going to push it into the blade until I run up against this guide. Then as I cut, I'm going to rotate it around. And what that'll do is it will allow me to get a good clean cut all the way around that is square. If you try to just push this through like you would with a table saw, the chances of that being misaligned are much higher. There's a look at that end. It's perfectly square, it's smooth. It's a little sharp, so I'm going to take some sandpaper and just put a little chamfer right around the edge to make that not so sharp. But no damage here. You know, if you used a hacksaw, this doesn't come out looking this nice. A wet saw, a tile saw like that is the perfect way to do this. So this is good. This is cut to length. Now I'm ready to put it on the bike and let's see how it looks. I got the fork installed. It went together really nicely. I used a split lower race. I'll show you guys that in a minute. One problem though, when I rotate the handlebars, they bind in certain positions. If you look closely, see that white powder? The fork is actually hitting the head tube as it rotates. So it's wearing the paint off of the fork. When I look at this, I can see that this part of the fork where it meets up with the head tube is not flat. It's got some high spots. Carbon bike parts like forks and frames are handmade. So this was made by a craftsman with human hands. This wasn't made with a machine. So variations like this are not uncommon in carbon parts. What I need to do is find a way to flatten that so that when it's put together we don't have those high spots. So with that race off, this is where it's rubbing. So this is on the back of the fork. It's rubbing right there, and if I turn it around, it's also rubbing right here in the front. So I've got an idea for a tool I'm going to 3D print. If you've seen my headset race lapping, carbon lapping video, you'll kind of know what I'm going to do. Here's a better look at the tool I used. So this one I 3D printed out of some wood PLA because that was what was in the printer. The fact that it looks like a free hub body is merely coincidental. I didn't intend for that. So the way this worked is I slid it down over the fork. I added some sandpaper, so this was held on with some spray adhesive, and then I rotated it. And what that did is it cut the crown of the fork square or perpendicular to the hole here or to the steer. So this center hole is perfectly sized, so it fit really tightly over that steer. That made sure as this was rotated, it would only roll in one direction, that it wouldn't get a wobble to it, and cut this out a square. This tool worked really well. The end result, the upper crown or where the seat sits on the crown turned out really nicely. Perfectly flat and so much better than it was. I needed a lower headset race for the new fork. I went through my bin and this is what I had, 5 of them. I tried each and this is the one here that fits the best. It's got a chamfer on the inner edge and this clears a radius that exists between the steer and the fork. So this one actually fits the best, it seats the best. Problem with this one is there's a bit of a gap, so it pushes the gap between the fork and the bearing just a little bit further than I would like. So when installed, there will be a gap. Unfortunately, Diamondback didn't sit these bearings very far into that head tube. Only about 3 millimeters. If they had gone another millimeter deep, it would have been much better. I like to use split races on carbon forks. So a split race is one that's got, where the heck is it? Got a split in it so that when you push it on, it expands. The other type is this fixed type, and I don't like to use these on carbon. They're pressed on, but they're incredibly difficult to remove once installed. So we're using a split race. So here's the race, here's the bearing. Let's go put this fork on. I forgot to mention it at the bench, but I'm using a 50 millimeter expander plug. This is one I had on hand. I would like a longer one, so I'm going to order a 100 millimeter. That'll give me enough room for the plug to go down through and extend down through that upper bearing. It'll be a lot stronger than running this one, but I've got this right now, so we're going to run it. So I'll get that put in, and then I'm going to install this fork, and then I'll tighten it up. So we've got the split race. What side do you guys install the split on? I've never really known which is the right way. I always point it to the back, but right now as I'm saying that, it occurs to me that splash up from the wheel would be likely to get in there. I may actually orient it to the side, but what do you guys do? What's the right way to orient that split on the fork? So we've got the race, and then we're back to doing this. So there's our external, or our lower bearing. And we've got the upper bearing and that conical preload washer, which is upside down. So upper bearing, preload washer. And then I needed a shim for clearance, so I've got a shim. Then the top cap. And I'm going to orient this so that the FSA writing is lined up with the fork, okay? And then a spacer or two, and the stem. Most manufacturers recommend that you run a spacer on top of the steerer for these carbon steerers. I like to run a 10 millimeter. So basically what it does is it moves the steerer up a little bit so you're not clamping right on the very end. Reduces the risk that you'll crack it when you tighten it down. So I'm putting a 10 millimeter shim on the very top under the preload cap. I don't have, oh, it's in my back pocket. I'm going to get the brake installed and the wheel installed, and we'll take a look at it. We'll see how it works. But so far, this is turning a lot better than it was before I did all that sanding to make that flat. That was totally worthwhile. That compression, or that expander plug I used, extends down. It's only long enough to get down to about here. I want to get a longer one. I mentioned this, 100 millimeter, so that it goes down through and below the upper headset bearing. That type is a lot stronger. It reduces the risk that you're going to run into trouble. I like to use a little carbon paste when I put carbon seat posts in aluminum. I know some people will say don't do it. I've never had a problem with it. I like it because it keeps you from having to really tighten down the clamp. It keeps the seat posts from sliding down. So it's called grease, but it's not really grease. It's really gritty. It feels like grease with sand in it, so almost like a lapping compound. But I like to use it. It does have a greasy consistency, so it will keep moisture from getting in between the seat tube and the post and corroding it in place. So to each his own, I suppose, but I like to use it. And a little bit of this stuff goes a long way. That's probably too much. So that's about all I put on there. It will scratch up the finish on your carbon, so if that's important to you, it's something to be aware of. So, I mean, really, you are basically locking this thing in place with greasy sand. I like the Parks Tool stuff. It's not as gritty as some of the others, like Finish Line. So this is SAC2. It works really well. Expensive for what it is. And this is a 350 millimeter post. I have to have the saddle right there. That's my saddle height on this bike. So I don't really need a super long post. All right, I'm gonna set the level of that saddle. We'll be done. I've got the saddle leveled the way I like it. Something that somebody mentioned in one of the previous videos was that my saddle was set back way too much. That's not the case. The design of this seat post may make it look that way, but the center of the saddle rail is right here. So the center is in the center of the clamp. So the saddle is only set back 20 millimeters. This is where I like it. So if you see this and you think to yourself, whoa, that saddle is way too far back, that top tube must be short, this bike must be too small. No, it's just an illusion caused by the design of this seat post. I took the bike out last night. I put a few miles on it. It wasn't far, 5 or 6 miles. I just wanted to try out the fork, check and make sure everything was put together correctly and everything worked. It went really well. No free play in the headset, everything's great. The fork actually rides quite nice. I'm really surprised at how much better the bike feels with the carbon fork and the carbon post. So now that I've confirmed that this fork is good, that I like it on the bike, I'm gonna sand it down and I'm gonna paint it to match the frame. If it didn't say Bucklos on the side of it in giant letters, I would consider leaving this carbon finish because I mean, it's a little dated, but I think it looks neat and I think it fits the style of the bike. I'm gonna use 3 coats of paint to try and get that color to match. So red paint doesn't cover very well. If I were to sand that down and try and paint it red, it would take at least half a dozen coats before the color started to come out uniform. So I'm gonna start with a coat of red oxide primer. Once that's on, it should give this a good base so I get a good even color. Then I'm going to use a can of red. This is Cardinal Red. And so this will give the paint a bright red color. And then the final coat will be this Inferno Red Metallic. This stuff almost sprays like a candy. It's somewhat translucent. So putting this on top of the red will give me the color that matches the frame. And the primer will hopefully make it so I don't have to use so many coats of base. And this is a guess. I don't know actually what color that frame is. This is the color I used for touch-up paint, and the touch-up paint was close. So we're gonna give it a try. If it matches, great. If it doesn't match, I'm not redoing it, so we'll just have to live with it. To prep this for paint, I'm gonna sand it with some 400 grit sandpaper. I wanna completely remove this logo. If I leave this here, it will telegraph through the paint. And even after we paint it, you'll be able to see it. You won't see it because it's a different color, but you'll see it because it stands out proud of the surface. So 400 grit is all I'm using. I don't need to go finer. I don't want to get into the carbon if I don't have to. And if I go finer than this, then I run the risk of the primer not adhering well. So 400 grit is where you want to be. And I'm just going to sand this, sand the whole part I want to paint. I'm not going to sand the steer, but I'm going to focus my energy on this logo until I get it sanded off. And then I will go over and just scuff up the rest of the paint. When you're sanding this down, you're just trying to rough up this paint. You don't need to remove the paint. It's in good shape. It's going to make a good layer to apply the initial coat to. So we're just trying to scuff it up so that that first coat will stick. If your paint were all chipped up and damaged, then you might try and sand it off. But we don't want to or need to do that in this case. Remember, we're just trying to scuff up the surface so that that new paint will have something to stick to. The fork is sanded good enough, so it is almost ready to paint. The last thing I'm going to do is wipe it down with some isopropyl alcohol. This will remove any grease or oil, usually just oil from my fingers that has gotten on the paint. I got the fork painted. I did it last night. I did it in the dark, so I didn't record it. It turned out really nice. The color match is okay. It looks all right for what it is. I will show you guys that in a minute, but I want to get the clear coat on it first so you get the real effect. So I'm going to take this outside and I'm going to spray a coat of clear coat on it. It's really windy out. Normally I would not spray on a windy day, but I really don't have any choice. I've got Tour of the Moon this weekend and I've got a lot of prep work to do for that. So right now is really the last time I have for several days to do this. So I'm going to set it up in the bike stand outside and I'm going to spray it. I want to show you guys the clear coat I'm going to use. It's a 2K urethane and there are some things you need to know. So I mentioned I'm using a 2K urethane clear. This is what I'm using. It's SprayMax's 2K Clear Glamour. I've used it on lots of things and I always have really good luck with it. Once it's cured, it's just like the paint on your car. Super durable, resistant to gasoline and solvents. It's a professional paint, just happens to be in a rattle can. I got the fork sprayed. It turned out really nice. This finish looks really good. There's a little bit of dirt in it. You know, it was windy when I was painting it, but you'll never notice once it's on the bike. I definitely won't notice. So I'm really happy with how this turned out. The color match is not perfect, and I'll show you that in a minute when we get it on the bike. But for what it is, I'm really happy with how it's turned out. So I'm gonna go find the bike. It's in the house. I'll bring it out. We'll get this put on. I want to add some decals to the side of the fork here, so some reflective vinyl, just to kind of mimic the original finish or original paint job on the other fork. But we'll do that and then we'll get it installed and this bike should be done. Yay! So I think ultimately when I get this fit right, I'm gonna make the fit of this match my carbon podium. So the stem on that sits a little lower than this. I think I'm ultimately gonna have to come back and cut this steer down maybe another 1/4 inch. But I'm not gonna do that now. What I wanna do is put it together and run it and figure out where I want the bars. So there's gonna be quite a bit of stack up here for a little while. But once I have that where I want it, then I can mark it and do a final cut. And when I do that final cut, it'll look just like it was when I showed you the first time. except I'll wrap the fork in a garbage bag so that it doesn't get scratched up. It's in my back pocket. All right, I gotta put this caliper on, but what do you guys think of that? The fork is a little bit darker red than the rest of the bike. I did not spray that red middle coat. I probably should have done that. But that ship has kind of sailed, and I'm not gonna repaint that fork, so we'll be happy with it the way it is. I mentioned earlier that I want to put some decals on this fork. So this white part here, what I want to do is just replicate that. So right there, and I'm going to use some reflective vinyl. I only clear coated this fork 2 hours ago, so I really probably shouldn't be putting it together right now just because, you know, the clear coat's still a little bit soft, but I'm in a hurry, kind of excited to get it done. So I know you guys are wondering, or at least I'm wondering, so I assume you're wondering, if the new fork and the seat post made any notable difference on weight. So before we take it outside and I see how it rides, I'm gonna see how much it weighs. So I'm gonna give you the number in pounds and then I will convert it to kilograms. So it weighs, you probably can't see that because my dumb arm is in the way. There we go. It's bouncing around 19.75, 19.8 pounds. So with the fork and the seat post, we did manage to get it under 20 pounds. That's pretty good. I mean, it's not great for a rim brake road bike, but for an entry-level rim brake road bike, that's pretty good. So let's take it outside. Let's see how it rides. I took the bike out earlier today and it rides really well. I rode the same route I rode in the original video. So in that video, it had 8-speed drivetrain and aluminum components. I thought it'd be interesting to see how it compared riding it in this state versus then. I did upload that ride to Strava, just like the last 2 videos. So if you're interested in seeing how I performed on the bike in this condition, you'll find that link down below in the description. So just like last time, I want to talk about the cost to get here. So I spent $130 on the fork and the post. The last video with the drivetrain upgrades, we were at $863. So if we add another $130 to that, we get to $993. So we are still under $1,000. In the ride I took this morning, I will say the fork, the seat post, and actually probably the new tires, it really transformed the way this bike rides and the way it feels. It feels snappy now, like you get on the pedals and it goes. And that is a lot of fun. So it's a lot more fun to ride. It's a lot more comfortable too. So it is a road bike and I do still feel every big bump, but the small stuff like the texture of the asphalt no longer comes through and up through the handlebars. So I would say, given that this was under $1,000 and now that it rides and handles and feels so much better, that we have slipped over from the not worth it to the absolutely worth it side. We've slid that far. Given that the bike was under $1,000 to put together, given that it weighs less than 20 pounds, we would be hard pressed to find a bike in this condition that weighs this much for that price. So I want to know what you guys think. Was it worth the time and energy to get here? Was it worth the $1,000? Was it worth the effort that went into painting that fork? Because that took a long time. It wasn't easy. Was it worth it? And do you agree that now this bike is worth the effort? I will say, if you've got an old bike like this and you're thinking about putting it together, look at the costs, think about what you want from the bike, and also consider when the bike is done, is it something you still want to have and you still want to ride? Because the hard truth is you will never get this money back out of this bike. If I were to put it on Craigslist, I would be surprised if I could get $300 for it. So that is just not the reason to do this. You've got to do it for other reasons. And you guys know that. You mentioned it in the comments section of both videos. So that's it for today's video. I hope you got something out of it. I enjoyed making it and I'm really proud of the bike we've got. Until next time, I'll see you later.